Hello again. This is Nathan Chua. I'm broadcasting here from the Philippines. And for those of you who are new here, I'm a counselor. And this is a video of a blog post that I put on my website. And it's only also going to be a podcast that you can listen to on Spotify. All right. So for those of you who are interested in what I do and how I can be of help to you, please do visit my website, onelifeonly.net. All right. So I call it a blogcast before when I was just doing podcasts for this particular, for every particular blog post that I make. But now I also have a video attached to the blog post and the podcast. So it's basically just me reading to you the blog post that I wrote or something that I wrote. Okay. So, so for this week, the article is about how to create lasting change in your relationship. All right. So here we go. There was a time in my practice as a counselor that I thought working on a relationship only required learning skills of communication that anyone can practice. Well, nothing has changed until this very day. Surprise, surprise. Except for the realization that the skills have to come with a motivation that creates lasting rather than fleeting change. Okay. So in my continuing search for what truly works for my clients, I have always been watchful of signs that tell me if what I do works or otherwise. For my over a decade's experience dealing with couples, I've gone through multiple approaches that I thought were the holy grail of couples therapy. They all seem to make sense, right? So, um, what I'm saying here, for those of you who are here, mga kababayan, dati kasi I thought you can just learn the skills and once you learn them, sundan mo lang and okay na kayo. Well, what I realized is there has to be something that's that goes beyond just learning the skills or memorizing the steps of what to do pag nag-uusap kayo. All right? So what's behind the actions or the new behaviors that you learn from therapy is critical to determine kung matutuloy yung changes or not, if the changes will indeed happen. Okay? So again, this is just part of the ad lib portion for those of you who are new here. And uh, maybe it's better for some of you who are very visual to kind of get a little bit more expounding on what I just talked or read for you on this particular slide. Okay. So let's go on reading the blog post. One of the approaches involved highly emotionally charged sessions that got into the deepest feelings that have thus far remained unseen by the couple. All right. So when I finished graduate school, one of the, let's say, most interesting approaches that I discovered was something focused on helping the couples feel safe enough to share their deepest emotions. Okay? Na so far hindi nakikita nung partner nila or spouse nila. Okay? So, and then the other approaches involve learning skills on how to communicate better and keep couples from spiraling into their usual patterns of unending arguments. Okay, so the other approach, the second approach was more, just learning how to communicate better, learning new skills, and changing the patterns of the way they communicate. All right. So it turns out that I would find both of these approaches to make sense, but also knew that there were areas that needed to be addressed It was only until I found a way to marry these two approaches that I sensed an end to my search. Well, at least until a time comes when a better approach is discovered. Okay? So, meron ako na-discover na pwedeng pagsamahin yung dalawa. Alright? While digging into deeper emotions was important, constantly employing this approach can prove rather exhausting for the couple as well as the counselor. So I'm talking about the first approach here. Realistically, people don't get into heavy conversations about their deeper emotions on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, with the first approach that I employed in the earlier years of my practice. Well, it does work in the counseling room, but when you get the couples to practice that at home, it's very hard because how many times can you be emotional in a day? It's hard, right? Or go into those deeper, uh, more, let's say, vulnerable emotions. Mahirap. On the other hand, with the skills training approach, a second approach that I talked about, couples can be very imprecise with their ways of handling conflict. It is hard to always be accurately following rules of engagement. Moreover, this technique coming from an expert can mean that couples are motivated more by complying with what the therapist is telling them to do or following rules outside of context sometimes and end up fighting about these rules. So, yon, no? So, I'll explain more about this maybe in the next few slides. All right. Uh, Basically, what I'm saying is, um, it happens na the couple would come home and talk between themselves and say na, di ba sabi ni therapist, ganon, ba't ganyan ka ngayon? Di ba ang rule natin dapat ganyan, dapat ganyan. So, eventually, nila pinag-awayan nila yung paano sila mag-away. Alright? Alright. So, I found an approach that blends these two rather seamlessly. Something that has to do with exposing the deeper emotions that are difficult to show, and at the same time, developing skills that can be practiced, not just because that is what the couple learn from therapy, but rather because they feel empathy toward each other. Okay? So it's a nice blend that I found here. It is about guiding the couple rather than following an imprimatur from the therapist. It is allowing them to discover what they can adapt as their own. Because let's face it, not every interaction that a couple does ends up in a wreck. They would have had at least a few conversations that worked in the past without any instructions from therapy. The rule only requires that couples be more observant of these successes or successful instances in the past that don't get noticed, repeated, and turned into habits, of course. So, this has a lot of, let's say, confidence in the couple that they have had conversations, difficult conversations in the past that they were able to handle effectively. All right. So it's not just about following what the therapist told the couple. All right. It's more about them noticing or being more observant of when they are successful and when they're not. So rather than teaching couples about what to say or do, it is more a process of discovery or trial and error. In addition to this, couples learn how to make disclosures that create empathy rather than defensiveness. It is part of our nature as social beings to have a sense of empathy towards another, if only the words or gestures exchanged create room for safety and bonding. It is one thing to say that your partner is insensitive to your needs, and another to say that you feel hurt when your partner behaves in a certain way in a given situation. Disclosing your vulnerable feelings over attacking your partner will usually influence your partner to feel empathic and act accordingly. All right. So we have a saying in the approach that I use. Let's focus on the wound rather than the arrow. Okay. So lasting change usually happens when the motivations for change are not just about what the couple learned from their therapist in the counseling room or what they read in some self-help articles or books. Lasting change comes from caring. Important yun, remember, caring. That's the part that happens when couples learn to feel safe enough to share their deeper and softer emotions. Okay? So, a metaphor that I often use for couples is that of a child who rants and throws a fit in order to get its way. Parents would then panic and address the fit rather than what it is that was causing the fit in the first place. A child, though, that learns to speak about its fears rather than its frustrations would more likely have that fear addressed by a compassionate, attentive parent. A pouting child would normally get a defensive reaction, while a fearful child would probably get attention. The former would usually end up being at best disciplined and at worst coerced by the adult parents into behaving properly, while the latter would likely end up getting assurance and affirmation. So this is just a little metaphor that I use to share with my couples. Uh, we react differently depending on how the other person enunciates or expresses a a want or a request. It could be heard as a request or a demand. Okay, so usually the consequences will be different depending on how you say it, right? So, in summary, lasting change comes not just from learning skills, but more so from caring for the other. The other half of it is becoming more aware of what approaches you do with your partner that evoke caring and which ones lead you back to square one. So, there's a lot of learning here about what works and what doesn't work in your relationship. Okay. So, it is about learning what approaches you do with your partner that evoke caring from your partner and which ones lead you back to that stuck loop where you're always ending up in a fight that doesn't seem to, let's say, resolve or get resolved. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed today's video podcast, and I did post a version of this earlier. This, well, honestly, it was just yesterday, but I think I had some internet problems. So I'm just repeating this to hopefully create something that has a better audio. Okay. So again, please visit my website, onelifeonly.net, for those of you who want to know more about what I do. Okay. So you guys take care now and enjoy the rest of your day or the rest of your week, wherever you are. Thank you for listening or watching and reading the blog post and visiting my website. Like and subscribe. Bye bye for now.